So today we are at the Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art in Sri Lanka, and it's on the 17th floor. Gonna have a tour of all the exhibits, so enjoy.
So a little bit about the museum. We're basically in the process of going into a much bigger, grander museum, but this is our first step. We started last December, and we started with this exhibition that's 100,000 Small Tales. It was curated by our chief curator Shannon Pereira originally for the 2018 Dhaka Art Summit. So she started work on this 2 years back, so it's a 2-year work in progress, and this exhibition has around 150 works of 43 artists working in and around Sri Lanka. Most of them are Sri Lankans. I think we just have a few whose artworks are about Sri Lanka, but they're not necessarily Sri Lankans. And the whole idea of the exhibition is exploring Sri Lankan identity, class, or what it is to be Sri Lankan, with independence and the civil war as a backdrop. So over the last, let's say, 100 or so years. The exhibition, like this idea, the whole concept, was originally inspired by this line by a Tamil poem, Sharan: "A bridge strengthened by its burden of 100,000 tales collapses with a single tear." So basically it's talking about stories and looking at art and each artwork as a story in and of itself. And there again, the artwork can be a story, but then our experience with the artwork is also another story, and it's very different. And also something that Shamini really found important was this word, a single tear. There it can also be interpreted as a tear, because it's more or less the same spelling. And even when we translate it in Sri Lanka, it's bindak. So it can be bindak as in the drop, or bindak as in to break. So that gives way to a lot of how we look at this exhibition, because there are a lot of different interpretations, a lot of different stories, per se. So I would not just be lecturing. I'll try to ask you 2 questions. Let's make this a conversation. So moving on, we've organized the exhibition according to galleries. So this is the first gallery, and usually in a museum there's like all these gallery texts over here. But we tried something a little bit different. There again, rather than giving this is what this exhibition is about, this is what this gallery is about, we've given like this very rough essence of what we are trying to do. So here it's home, land, survey, country. And the translations, even those are not quite direct, they are left for interpretation. So it's more an experience than an actual translation. So speaking of home, land, country, and the final word survey, this is the first artwork in the exhibition. This is by a really important artist in Sri Lanka, Chandragupta Theravada. So this is just basically trying to represent a country, and one of the simplest ways to a map, like it's simple. And here what Theravada did was, he went to the Department of Tourism, he just got a tourist map of Colombo. And this work is, in the 90s he had started this, movement, a series of works called barrelism, where he used this symbology of a barrel to say a lot of things. So here, if you can just look at it, he's taken a normal map and he has done a few markings with barrels. Like he has just drawn barrels and a few markings. Would anyone have any idea about these markings?
Can I ask the barrels?
Yeah.
How are these yellow squares?
These are black. He's just drawn it with a pen.
Oh, these ones here. All right.
So, in a very Sri Lankan context, especially for Theravada, the barrel originally, this whole idea of a barrel came with the British colonizers, where they bought things like tar or any like. It was basically a way to transport cargo. But later, once the war started, security got really high. A barrel became a sign of an army checkpoint. So usually in the 90s and even up to like 2009, there were these checkpoints barricading the roads. And barrels at one point, which was used to make roads or to create, became this sense of barrier. And what he has actually marked here are all the army checkpoints that was there in Colombo at the time.
You mean during the wartime?
Yes, so when we created this work. So, and here he again uses a tourist map. It's the tourist map tries to show the country in its most idealistic form, the interesting places, what you should see. But he juxtaposed it with barrels, which is still a part of Sri Lanka. It's a part of our identity at that time and even now. And it's not something a lot of people really wanted to talk about. And that's a lot. Theonora's work is a lot like that. He talks about the politicals and he talks about the topics that no one really wants to talk about. And so this is one kind of map. And this is another kind of, and it's supposed to be a map. But now I find this very interesting. This is not like anything I've seen personally before.
So this is by Theonora?
No, this is by another art. This is by an art. It's called Mourning. We do have a few of his other works. So he calls these GPS drawings. Any idea what this would be?
GPS drawings. Interesting.
So would you have any idea like what is going on over here? I'll just give you, it's a map of sorts.
Is it like a trail or?
So,
Excuse me.
No, this is what he did. So, if you can see, usually these have places marked. Here it's Kilinoy, Chile. So what he did was, when he was traveling from point A to point B, it could have been a trishaw, it could have been a jeep, a bus, a boat. He just opened up his book, kept his gel pen on the paper, and let the travel, the movement, the jerks, them just do the mark making.
Wow, that's brilliant.
Yes. And that's why, for me, it's not, it's not the most technically advanced work, but the thought that goes into doing something like this makes it very interesting. And in a way, this is a map.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can see the turns, the texture of the road, what it was like. And it's a very experiential thing. Not like a very realistic rendition, but again, it's very realistic. It's as realistic as you can get. So, and for me, this is more an exploration of what art can be. And as a museum, I find a work like this very important because it opens people's eyes on like, art is not just pretty things you can, hang in a wall. Because these were just his notebooks. These are not created to, be framed and hung in a wall. It's very interesting. And moving on, this is a series of photographs by Stephen Champion, which you have quite a few works by. And I find these rather interesting because these focus on, Sri Lanka. When we say homeland country survey, this talks a lot about the homeland part of it. Because it's the people and how they've been living. So it all starts over there with an Independence Day celebration. I mean, as a country, I feel compared to most countries in the region, we are still very influenced by colonization. And when independence first happened, so this is just, and this is not the first independence celebration, this is just an independence celebration, that really did some, it created a cultural shift, and in a way it did impact art, but it impacted people a lot. This is one kind of celebration, very somber, very regal in a way. And this is another kind of celebration. I mean, just looking at it, what do you think it might be?
party.
Yeah, like I feel like this is just typical like Colombo middle class
Yeah.
parties. So this you might actually relate to it in a way. The title of this painting is St. Peter's College Overseas. So this is basically a St. Peter's OBU party. And what's interesting about this particular photograph is the time it was taken in. It was taken in the 90s when the war was at its height. So, the 83 riots happened. Sri Lanka was not in a good place.
Right.
There were a lot of people suffering.
Right.
But then there was a certain set of people who were able to do this. And that also talks about another really, I wouldn't say important, but an important part of Sri Lankan life, which is class. Because these works reflect a lot on class. Because there were people whose houses were getting destroyed, who the financial impact of the war was impacting them, but there was a certain level in society who was able to do this.
Right.
And they were having a jolly good time. But then again, these people might not really seem that happy, but they are also in for a jolly good time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
So, up until recently, this phenomenon was really there in Colombo. So, we had these B-rated movie theaters.
Yep.
So, the name of the movie is Private Lesson. It's actually an American movie. Yeah, it's this very raunchy comedy.
Yeah.
And it was just like, they're all there for a good time, but the difference, like, there's like a lot of stress, all that here. But then again, what I really find very interesting here is they are not covering their faces, they are not looking away, they're just, this person's looking straight into the camera. I don't know why, but I find that interesting because now it's all about, okay, if you're watching something, it's a very hush-hush thing. And here, again, talking about lessons, class. This is a classy class. So, any idea what this is or who these people might be?
If I was to guess, I would say dancing classes.
Wrong.
Not.
Any idea who this lady is?
Oh yeah, familiar, but just doesn't.
That's Rosie Sena.
Ah yes, that's right.
So, after Rosie Sena became Mrs. Sri Lanka, she used that notoriety and everything, and she did class. These are more like finishing schools, etiquette classes.
Etiquette, okay.
Teaching girls how to walk, how to just wave the proper way. It's just all that. And
Right.
that also is this whole big conversation about class. Because there was a certain level of women who wanted to be taught how to be women, how to walk properly, how to talk properly, all that. And when the curator places these two works next to each other, it's this private lesson. And this is also a private lesson.
Right.
In a way. And also talking about class and all these levels in Sri Lankan society, this is something, it's as entangled to our identity as the war or independence. Tourism. Tourism was this, it's still a big thing, right? And what I really like about this is it takes all the glamour away from tourism. This is a very normal thing, and this is something we rarely get to see because it's just a lady. Because when we usually, and then there's all this conversation about tourism, how tourists are affecting the quote-unquote culture, or there are all these ideas that this is just they've just. And that's something I really like also about Stephen Chan. It just shows things as it is most of the time. Like, it's documentation in a very simple way, but in the documentation there is art. So here again, these two works again talk about class and for the everyday person, I would say. Because this over here is just some random little shop on the side of the road. This is not a bookshop, because if you can see there are these plastic balls, these letters for sale, and amongst that there is spoken English. Because that's again, it shows this whole obsession with Sri Lanka, and I feel that the last picture and this has something in common, because the whole importance of English that was given to us by the colonizers has given, to this day it's there, people want to learn English to get a better life, to get a better job, to make sure their kids end up in the right place. And this whole thing is like a conversation about class, language, and how Sri Lankans just, play or just live their identity. And in our perspective as a work of art, I like how this is just a collection of just random objects, I would say, because this is not a series where he created all these works. These are just things that he found, but somehow together it tells this really interesting story. So moving from the stuff in the wall to this series. I mean, I would go as to saying this monstrosity of a series. Any idea what this could be? So for me, this is really interesting because it shows the potential of what art can be and what the thought behind art can really do. Any idea? So this is a series. It starts from here and ends there. It was actually done by a group of people. They were not actually quote unquote, how should I say, artists. They were legal theorists, political activists, and there was an architect involved. So it was Rabbi Chandataswata, who was the architect. He was given a brief saying to interpret the Sri Lankan constitution and design it as an architectural structure. Because that's just that idea of doing that.
Wow, so the constitution
This is
converted into architecture.
Yes, if the constitution was a building,
Yeah.
this is
Wow, just nuts.
So this is the original, the first constitution, and over time all these were different amendments.
So we're starting from here.
We start from here. This is what we got
Okay.
from the British. This is not the parliament.
It looks like
It looks like the parliament.
exactly.
When Chandra really designed this, he wanted it to portray the parliament to a certain extent. But then with time, if you can see from the roof, the influence extends out. And then at one point, when the executive presidency became a thing, it just, brought it out. And China did a talk here the other day, and I quote him when he said, it turned into that monstrosity. Because that's the executive presidency and the whole centralized power, and it's a mess. And also, what's I really like about this work, if you have time, just go through these sketches, because it's not just what you see from the outside, there's actual structures inside. Especially in the last one, the circle, there are certain corridors inside, because the work is called Corridors of Power. Okay. So there are actual corridors inside, and this has really small little details. For example, this here thing that juts out is the jurisdiction, the law. And over time, if you can see, the roof just slowly just covers the law, and at one point it is there, and if you can see, the final one has this little ladder coming out. That can be interpreted like that. Yes, it's actually, that's his idea. And I find this really interesting, because this was a work where they wanted to bring understanding of what the Constitution actually is to be for. Because personally I haven't read the Constitution, and I don't know anyone who has, who's not a law student. And for something a little bit,
less about the concept, but more about just how fun and exciting this is. This is by Aubrey Collett. He's one of the pioneering artists in the country because he was a member of the Colombo 43 group. And he was a political cartoonist. And this was just, I mean, we can't really show each page because it's so old. But we don't, because they haven't made any editions of this. And I find this just really interesting, a little piece of history. And it's just like the art. When I look at this, for me, it's like it's just a really good cartoon. Because there's like, I mean, a lot of character in the lines, but also a certain sense of class. Like, it's fancy art for me. And this, I'm just taking you here. And so, because you asked me, this again is by Kingsley Gunasekara, Gunatilaka, sorry. The Sinhala, it's basically a Sinhala dictionary in a presence. Any idea the Sinhala only act. I'm not going to talk a lot about this because this whole concept of this is shown later on in a few galleries. And just looking at this as like an object, like as an art object, this is like, I mean, let's say if we take 100 years ago, no one would have thought that this could be considered art. But then it's interesting on what can and cannot be art. And I'm in this school where I think like everything's art if the intention's there. Speaking of everything's art if the intention's there, I'm taking you to this series of photographs, which is my personal favorite in this gallery. At first glance, what would this be? Just look at it and just tell me what do you think this is?
They look like all worn out diaries. Oh,
There's albums actually. Yeah.
sorry, what?
Worn out albums. Yeah.
Albums.
Photo albums.
Oh, okay.
But just looking at it, what do you feel? Is it like this really happy, beautiful?
No,
thing?
definitely not.
So, what's interesting about this is, if you just look at the name of the artwork, it's, any idea what this might be? It's a set of coordinates.
Oh, you mean that? Okay, yes. Yeah.
And it's coordinates to Mulevaika.
Sorry?
Mulevaika.
Mulevaika.
It's in the north.
Right.
And would anyone know what was important about Mulevaika?
Oh, was it? I would say it's part of the war's
It's the
carnage.
very end of the war.
Yeah.
Where Mulevaika is just a small stretch of beach. And that's where at the very last moment the refugees came running towards, whatever that was under the Sri Lankan army. And these photo album was something the artist found thrown away in Mulevaika.
You mean these are actual albums?
This is an actual album the artist found in that beach.
Right.
So for me, I actually cried the first time I properly got to process this, because someone took a photo album with them till the very, very last moment. Because by the time the refugees came to Mulevaika, they had to be removed 4 or 5 times. So when they were originally told to leave their houses, they took whatever was important, and this was part of it. Then again, when they were taken from point A to point B, they threw away most things, but this was still there. So this was something they threw away in a last-ditch effort to save their life. But the fact that they threw it at the very last moment also makes whatever was in these really, really important to them. And I mean, this is just a really simple book, and in a way, it looks beautiful, the photograph. At first glance, I thought this was some, a handmade book, and it's really beautiful, but looking into it, there's like a lot of pain in this, and for me, that's very, very powerful, and that's something only the visual arts as a medium can do.
because let's say if this was a poem, it's quite straightforward. But here it's, I feel, so Cassie Machado, the artist, but she works in the US right now, if I'm not mistaken. This is not just a work of art. It's whatever's here and the experience, the conversation we have, what's there in the middle over here. All together. When we were actually first talking about this, I felt it almost as if she choreographed what our reaction would be to this. Because there was a reason she took it out from the beach, took it to her studio with this pristine white background. And this is for me one of the most powerful works. And just moving on, let's go into the next gallery. Here, we take a step back from talking about the country, the bigger concepts. We go into something much smaller, but infinitely more complex, which is self-portrait gaze. So this talks about us, who we are. So self-portrait is us showing ourselves to people, like how we portray ourselves, or the idea of a self-portraiting art, and gaze. Now, gaze is a very big concept in talking about this because that's one of the most important words the curators used. And if you just look at this gallery, in a traditional sense, there is only two self-portraits. One over there, which I'll explain to you, and the other is this. But even this is the artist drawing himself. But again, it's not a traditional self-portrait. And this is not an easy artwork to interpret because, as in, the artist wasn't really trying to say one thing, and like it's a whole experience with like the sheer size of the artwork.
Is there a particular order where it starts
there is
from?
actually an order because he wanted it to, because even this space in the middle was part of the artwork.
Right.
It has been dictated, like there has to be this amount of
Right.
space.
Okay.
So here it's about what do you think it might be? Like any idea?
Looks like some sort of evolution of personality, possibly.
It's very interesting because these are, I interpret it as like the artist's different facets, like evolution in a way. Because I am a strong believer that we are never the same person. Every single thing that happens to us fundamentally changes us in a way. And this is just the artist and his many different iterations. I feel like it's a conversation because these things that just go out. I feel it's like, for me, it's a conversation that the artist's different selves talks about the artist. And in a way, art is a conversation.
It is, yeah.
It is. And there was one point there was this like really short lady, she just stood here. And it was like all this thoughts in her head. You're like, that can be an interpretation. It's really interesting. I'm just taking from the more conceptual actually stuff to this. I mean, there isn't this like huge, complicated concept behind these works, but again, these are some of the most important works. It's according to me, I find these works really important because they were taken by a really important person. Now, in the previous guy, I spoke about Aubrey Collett and how he was a pioneer in Sri Lankan art. So, would you all happen to know about the Colombo 43 group?
Yeah, I've heard of them.
So, in 1943, it was a group of people, I can't remember exactly the number, they got together and they wanted to create an artistic identity, an artistic style that is uniquely Sri Lankan. Because by that time we were a colony of Britain, and whatever art that happened here had a lot to do with like British ideals or showing Sri Lanka in this very idealistic. Because at that time it was all these nice serene watercolor paintings of.
You mean through the Western lens?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll actually talk about, when I talk about this, I'll get to that. This very, monks descending down a stone staircase, drawn in watercolor, this very touristy.
ideas. And the Colombo 43 wanted a very Sri Lankan identity in art. And it said, some say that, modernism in a Sri Lankan context might have even started with them. So this is the man behind all these photographs, W.J.G. Beebe. In a very 21st century idea, what does this photograph look like?
Selfie.
It's like it's a mirror selfie.
From the 40s.
This is from the 40s. So this is actually W.J.G. Beebe, who is the photographer.
Yeah.
But he's not known to be the photographer in the group. He was a painter. He did watercolor. And there is a sketch of him in the other gallery. He was not the photographer of the group. He was the photographer of the group. If I say his name, everyone would know who he is. Any idea who this might be?
Is that George Keith?
Close. Lannan. This is Lannan. So he was the photographer in the 43 group, but here he's being photographed. And this is Ethel Swan, I think a close family friend or even a relation of W.J.G. Beebe. I'm not too sure about it. And this, for me, is in a way a self-portrait because it shows the artist without the whole pretension of art. Because these were not meant to be exhibited. These were found in the artist's estate. And this was just him having a good time with a friend. Because we think of them as this group of artists, but they're actually friends. And they were just having a good time. And here, this is just the artist experimenting with what photography can be. This is a double exposure, so he kept the two negatives and then exposed it. So these were things that were not done at the time, and these were very experimental. So for me, it's W.J.G. Beebe, who we think of as a painter, experimenting with photographs, something like that, a selfie, or like exposing, double expositions, or just taking photos of his or her friends. Because, today we live in a time where it's so easy to take a photograph that we don't really realize how much of a thing it was to take these photographs. And it's something we noticed really recently. We originally thought it was this and this painting that was double exposed here. But then it's a different paint. It's a different photograph. Because if you see, here his hands are in the shadow, but here Ben's hands are in direct sunlight. So it's not the same photograph earlier. So I don't know how the process might have been. I don't know why he didn't use the exact same photograph, but it's a thing. And this huge monstrosity of a painting, of a photograph, and here he's looking away, literally averting our gaze. Here, again, they take identity and the whole act of a photograph, and in this case, measuring, as this very gross violation of a person's image. So this whole idea of measuring, the name of these artwork is Do Not Measure Me, came from how when people were recruited to the LTTE, the first thing they were done was they were measured. And that's what he has recreated here. And here he's looking down and away, covering his eyes and his important and discernible features in shadow to avert that gaze. And also when we spoke about this very colonized lens of photography, when we were so for the British people, exotic Sri Lankan men in photographs was a thing. Because there was a certain eroticness about these exotic Asian men in British society. And here again he's talking about that idea as well, because he's shirtless and it's very open. There again it's a conversation about, at one point, because this looks like a very, pre-independence photograph. It's a lot like measuring, his body, his identity, and him trying to look away and hide him. So there's a certain sense of agency, because when talking about portrait and gaze, we had this conversation where a portrait is where the person in the portrait has a sense of agency. They are sitting there and their photo is being taken or their painting is painted, but they are there with a certain amount of agency. But when it's gaze, they don't even know we are looking at them. So here again it's this whole idea of gaze, but these three take it into a whole new level. I mean, when do you think these photographs were taken? Checking with the style and everything. These were taken in 2010. So these were recreations of that style of home studio photography. I've seen photographs of my grandmother like this, where they bring a photographer to their house, have their finest saris, finest furniture out, and just have a day taking photographs. But here, that whole idea of averting gaze was taken into this whole new level by literally covering it with hair. I mean, hair for me is like this, it's very visceral, and I mean they could have just covered their face with anything, but the fact that it's hair gives it an almost creepy quality. Because I've known certain people, they do not want to look at it because this is creepy. Because it could have been a veil, but then she's using hair to it's very visceral and it makes the image very powerful. And I mean, I could talk about this work alone for hours because there's so much symbolism. Why is that girl not covered in her face?
What's your interpretation of that?
So for me, I feel like there are also these feminist undertones to this as well. Because it's a female artist, and these, more colonial style photographs were a lot about, showcasing what's important. So here's my wife. Look at her. She's pretty. And this is them saying, no, this is not who I am because when I'm going here, because it's a direct, very feminist conversation between these two artworks, them saying, no, I am hiding myself with hair, with a part of me. So, I mean, each day I come and think with this artwork, I just think of all different stuff. So, moving here, this whole thing about identity, feminism, all that. This is a series of performance pieces. So these were performed in front of an audience and then recorded. It's called Somewhere Between the Truth and Its Telling. And if you all just have time, these videos are a bit long, so we'll have to just take a look at it. But here again, it talks about the idea of a woman, how these things make her who she is. Yes, it's the jewelry, it's the hair pieces. It's all about how a woman is viewed and all that. So I find the fact that these two artists were placed in this way as a conversation. And again, this again is this and these works talk about this other tradition in art called performance art. Because usually when we think of art, it's an object that you can hang in on a wall or show in a gallery or a museum. But in the 50s and 60s, there was a movement that was directly opposing to that called performance art, where this act that was performed was the artwork. So taking the whole, meaning outside, even as just works of art, these can be really interesting because it's just people doing things. Here, she's over there, she's covering her face with this is more very traditional art. Again, it's very historical here because this again is Aubrey Collette, the cartoonist we spoke about before. And this whole idea of, the Colombo 43 group. Because, can you guess who this is? Who's this is Aubrey Collette's caricature of a certain person. You've seen him before. No, you've literally seen this person before. This is Lana Wet. This is Aubrey Collette's caricature of Lana Wet. And why this painting here is, why this drawing rather is placed here is because of what's on the other side of
All right.
Yes, it's a really small, it's not even a painting, it's a sketch. It's a study this artist did for a bigger painting. And this is again by W.J.G. So we know him, when I spoke to him, he was this painter. This was just a sketch he did as a painter for something bigger. And it's called Off Large Road. So this is just the view outside his house into someone else's house. So you can see this is the window and you can see the road and the house. And that house was Aubrey Collett's house. So Aubrey Collett was this very active political cartoonist. And at one point he had to leave Sri Lanka and go to Australia because of the situation in the country. And this was W.J.G. Billing drawing Aubrey Collett's house after he left. So this is, but there's a certain sorrow and like somberity to this, but it's also this very happy painting. Like it's still a sketch. There's a certain playfulness, certain joy to it, and this shows a Sri Lanka that we are not that familiar with because this is the 40s and 50s, or even 60s. Sorry. So this is like a Sri Lanka that I don't know about you all, but like it's not something I've experienced because I'm still tiny. But moving on to Sri Lanka that is a bit more familiar to us. These paintings were drawn in 1999 and they're called nightscapes. So these were literally drawn at night, painted at night. And this can also be interpreted in a way that, Sri Lanka was at this very dark moment in our history where, this was 1999, so the war was at its highest. But this is a Sri Lanka that we are all very familiar with. And here the artist explores what it was like to live in this time through this very simple, in a way it is quite simple. It's very minimalistic. It's just the view from where the artist was staying to Bolgoda Lake. So this is just Bolgoda Lake as the artist saw at night, because we had a talk by one of the artist's friends, and what she said was this was very much the perspective that the artist saw it in, like it's his idea. And these are just little I really found it interesting that he didn't want to stick to this very traditional square, because for me, I think of it as the artists, like if you think of fragments of memory or like just fragments of experience, this gives that idea. Whereas a photograph or like a square is a very definitive thing, and this isn't. Something also very interesting about this work is that the artist painted these at night with candlelight, so very minimal amount of light. And that's one of the reasons why we painted the wall black, because if it was on a white background, these really subtle, you can see like subtle changes in color, and those would not have been seen, because at first glance, these look like, oh, I could have done this. These are quite simple, anyone could have done it. But there's a lot of subtle details here. Now, things like these are just the walls, the window frame, all that. And this is to give a very intimate look into the artist, because this is not some imagined perfect version of a scenery. This is exactly what the artist saw. This, for me, like design-wise, it's a really nice space, but also it's a very intimate piece. Speaking of intimacy, I'm taking you to this work. This is called Rest, and it's and the artist who did this had this entire series of works done with safety pins. And here,
It's all safety pins.
yeah, safety pins.
Wow.
So it's basically, there's a pillow underneath, but it's like a safe pillowcase made out of safety pins. And there it's this whole idea of intimacy, where obviously our bed and our pillows are some of the most intimate things we have.
Yeah.
But there's a certain, it's not meant to be
painful, but it's because if you just slightly touch it, it's not painful. It's just a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So it's that whole idea, because this artist also has a lot of feminist themes in her work, and talking about intimacy, our lives, our most secretive selves or experiences, and how they might not always be the most comfortable. And in a way, this gallery talks about landscapes, territory, and the fact that this work is here. I mean, it's a pillow, but because most of these can be considered landscapes. It's very interesting why it's here. And I view it because it's our inner landscape, our intimate lives, our bedroom, which, and it's very different as opposed to most works here, but it's also one of my favorites here. And thinking of different things, this is a series of work, but more than a single work of art, I view this as a more historic artifact. So this is a magazine. It started from 1975 all the way up to 1990. So these were the magazine's name, if you're sure it, is Alay, which means wave. And it's the closest thing like that was there to a lifestyle. So this magazine included things like movie reviews, poems, and later on they actually went on to, because the first few issues it was poems that was in the cover, and later they commissioned artists to create work. So for example, there are certain works here by an artist called A. Mark, and there aren't many of his artworks left. He was one of the biggest artists in the north, and none of his works are really left. And if you think of the time frame, 1975 to 1990, this was a time where printing was actually quite, there, and what we know as offset printing was widely used. But these were not offset printed. These were what we know as letterpress printing, where this was basically what was invented by Johannes Gutenberg back in the 14th century, where each letter was put in, and if you just really look here, these are basically these artworks. They carved it into metal, inked it, and had to press it for each version. And this happened in 1986.
Wow.
There was no real need to do this because we had the technology.
Yeah.
And I've cross-checked with some of the books I had from my grandfather's era. They were offset printed. But what's important here is these were publications made in Jaffna. And there's actually a short documentary in the 4th gallery, because during the war there were certain embargoes on Jaffna, and they didn't really have the technology or the material to do offset printing. So this is the people doing what they can with what they have. And for that, because letterpress printing is not an easy task, because there's special kinds of ink and there's a whole process to it. But these are really high quality work, and everything had to be done by hand. That makes it very interesting as just a piece of historical artifacts, because I'm a big nerd for these kind of letterpress prints, so I found this really interesting.
Because the amount of work that went, it's as you said, it's art in its sense.
In order to just make this line, someone had to literally choose from this entire set of letters and make each of these lines as a mirror reversed. So it's not this is not what they made. They made it from here to here. The letters were flipped. So how many lines are there?
And imagine something like this.
Yes. So someone had to literally etch that into a piece of metal like this.
Yes. Wow.
So moving on to this work, I find that's not
really a lot to say about this work because it's all up to your interpretation. Because the art, so this the Alvis is this very imaginative. He just wants you to make a story. He's really into stories. So what interesting is the material used in this work. Any idea what he put? Clay. It's clay. Like what kind of clay?
Like
This is basically children's clay.
Yeah.
And what I found, and children's clay, plastic boxes we just found anywhere. And why I really wanted to talk about this was he elevated everyday just things we would not usually consider art into art. So it's not about the material, it's not about the artist's quality oil paint, it's not about the stable hair paint brushes, it's the artist that makes it important. So moving on to our final gallery.
What about these sketches here?
Okay, so since you asked, so these
Like of religions here.
it talks about a lot, and these are very, like basically looking into the artist's psyche, because the whole style of this is inspired by what was known in the 20th century as the Surrealist movement.
Okay.
So the artwork were more like dream sequences, these very bizarre images, because if you look at that,
Yeah.
so these are very bizarre images, and the whole point of surrealist drawings or paintings is to make it look so weird that people would have no choice but to think. So here again, I feel these works are not something that should be explained, but rather should be experienced. Because there's just so much symbols, just so much going on, that like this picture itself here, you can just spend a lot of time here. Like, I mean, this symbology for me represents Angulimala.
Yeah.
But what is like this very traditional teacher role and like what looks like a modern day doctor and a nurse doing here? Why is this so-called teacher holding like a bull's head?
Yeah.
Like, what is this? So, it's the explanation I would like to give is it's surrealistic. So it's also this whole exploration of the subconscious. It's a lot of symbology, and you need to spend time with this and I know it sounds a bit hippie, but let this painting speak to you. Because it speaks to everyone in a different way. Like, for example, this is something not many people noticed, but here, do you notice anything in this painting in particular?
Yeah, the religious symbols.
Like, that's quite apparent, but there's something like not many people notice about this drawing. Just look at the negative space, the white. You see India? Yes, India over here, and then Sri Lanka over here. See, it's things like that. The more you look at these, the more the painting tells you, the drawing tells you.
And you get skulls right
Yeah.
down here as well, yeah?
And when I think of this kind of work, I don't think the artist actually sat down and thought, okay, I'm going to place skulls here. I'm going to the skulls represent this. It's more like if you just look at the strokes, the mark making, it's very spontaneous. So it feels like almost automatic. So there's this thing called automatic writing that was also used by the surrealists at one point. The artist just drew whatever was in his mind, and you can really feel it in the lines he has drawn. So likewise, I don't want to give an explanation saying this is what this is about, because the artist would have wanted you to really experience it. But when looking at it, I mean, it's weird, and it's meant to be weird, and let that weirdness make it important. So, moving on to the fourth gallery, which is something I really like. This gallery, like the subject matter even is very kind of heavy. It talks about mourning, loss, and belief. So I've been with this exhibition since it started, and even I'm still not sure exactly how mourning and belief come together. So if you all have your interpretations of it, please be open. But so mostly from what I see, This area talks a lot about mourning, they are about belief. So this set of work is done, so it's centered around Shanathanan, who was a teacher and an artist based in Jaffna, and most of the works of his students. And here it's all about loss. So if you look here, this is an etching done by Shanathanan. So if you'd like, I could explain what an etching is. That interests any of you all. So an etching is basically, you take a plate of usually copper, you apply a wax on it, and then you draw on the wax with like this pointed tool, and then you put it in acid. Then you wash away the wax, so whatever you scraped away, it's remaining, and then you put ink, and then you press it. So this is a form of printing. And here, it's, what is this? What's there in this?
Emancipated dog.
Yes, like this whole, this stretch of the dog, and this how the emancipated look. It gives this almost sad stray dog vibe. And then there are these two slippers. Are these from the same pair?
No.
Is that because these are both right slippers? And there, it's again, the dog might be howling for the loss of someone.
Some sort of calamity.
Yes, and the fact that there's two slippers that belong to someone else means there's a loss in another slipper. So, and in direct response to that, there is this work. And at first glance, it looks like an actual slipper, but it's made out of terracotta.
I see. So this is done by Sarat,
Yes,
this one?
this is Shanathanan.
This is Shanathanan.
Yeah. So
Shanathanan.
yeah. So this work's done by Shanathanan.
Okay.
And
This one is Shanathanan.
Yeah.
This one. Okay.
And this is Sarat Kumarasi.
This is slippers.
Yeah. And this was also a study for a much bigger sculpture.
This one.
Yes. So it's a story of Carnegie, and it was a sculpture that was supposed to be, supposed to be a public artwork to commemorate the anti-tamil rights of 58. But this work never came during the colonial time or during the war. And how the artist drew it was, if you could come closer and look here, there's like this imprint. So when drawing, the artist kept a piece of carbon paper under and drew it with an empty pen. And then the actual print is on the other side. So it's supposed to be here, but it's not, it's somewhere else. It's that idea that the artist was trying to give. And this artist again is a student of Shanathanan, so there is that whole idea. And this is, I would say, a very endearing work. We have time because this is one of the few works you can actually touch. This is called Cabinet of Resistance number 2, a work created by Shanathanan. Just take some time and read all these stories, because these are all stories from wartime Sri Lanka about how simple people with their simple lives resisted whatever was thrown at them, whether it be embargoes or just taking your child to fight for the LTTE, and how people in their little small ways resisted things. Because there are stories about how a 50-year-old lady learned to ride the bicycle, and how a mom was hiding her son in a bunker under their house. And this is very endearing, and for me this is like just art that can really speak, because it literally speaks to people through the words. But there's just so much happening here, and in a way this really embodies 100,000 small tales, because it is literally 30 tales. And talking about the art trajectory in Sri Lanka, these works are quite important in the history of art, because these were drawn by Jagat Veerasinghe, who is again one of the big, like the current big artists in Sri Lanka, like Mourning, Shanathanan. Jagat Veerasinghe it's a collection of paintings. And just looking at it, I mean, try not to interpret the symbols. He has written certain things. What do you feel this is about? Like, just think what would my artist have been going through when he was drawing these. Okay? Yes, and that's something I find really like awesome about this work, because most of it is quite abstract. But by looking at the lines, the way he has applied the paint, you can literally feel what the artist was feeling. And when this was first shown in 1992, work like this was not seen by Sri Lanka. Like, they did not like it, because this is not some really nice looking artwork that you can hang on your dining room wall. Because this was art that wanted to speak, and it didn't speak, it shouted whatever it had. And just take some time and really look closely at the mark making. So mark making is the whole process of drawing something. Because if you just look here, if you can look here, I've just spent like half an hour just looking at this little part of this. Because how there's applied the paint, the stress, you can literally see his strokes. And through those brush strokes, you can experience what he might have experienced. And this can, work like this can be really powerful. And it also opens the eyes to what to really look at art here. Because here you can somehow figure out what the symbols are. But even if you can't figure out the symbology, just looking at parts of it and trying to imagine, it's an exercise in empathy. Because through this artwork, you can in a way feel what the artist was feeling. And moving on, now we've talked about loss and all that. Let's talk about this since it's here. This is where we talk about belief. The name of the artwork is It's an Untitled Chapter. And what do you think is happening? And what do you think is the actual artwork in this? So when installing this work, what we got were these terracotta volumes. And then we had to go, when the curators and people doing the installation went to PETA, got one of these things they used to sell sweet tickets in. So here it's again this conversation about Buddhism and how it's being commodified in our time. Because you're using Buddhism as sweet tickets. And this artist, Bandhus Manateri, now works more as a performance artist. So he does a lot of performances now, but this is him, and this was done very early on in his career. So it's just experimenting. And I feel this is even though the topic of it is quite deep, it's a very fun art. And talking about belief on what cannot be art. We have, it's basically a tire on a pedestal. So any idea why this is here? And why would anyone call it art? Any idea? So this again talks, it's a little bit of his art history trivia. There was this phenomenon in art called the ready-made, where things that were just out there were brought in either to a gallery or a museum context.
Sorry, what was it called?
The ready-made.
The?
Ready-made.
Ready-made.
Yeah. So
Okay.
things that were already made, yes, were brought into a gallery or a museum and called art. So here's a tire, this is art. And then it gives this whole belief on what can and cannot be art. But just a little bit context, this artist is one of really he's not this talentless artist who just bought a tire and called it art. And it's not an easy way out. But he works a lot with stage decoration, like he sets for stage dramas. So it's a set design. And this is, I mean, in his career, he might have just used everyday objects to tell a story. This is him using everyday objects to tell a story. So, there again, we can question what our belief in art can be. And moving on to this one. Because I try to talk about this in every tour I do, because this is my favorite work in period. So, just looking at it, what do you think? Who do you think this is? Yes. So, this time, we actually don't know what the artist's intent was. So, the artist is Farid Ulman. He was not an artist he was a political cartoonist, and that's all people knew about him until after he passed away. Because he has been doing a lot of painting, but no one really knew. It was after his passing that his family put out the artwork in an exhibition, and this is one of his artworks. And this is not an artist who was trained as an artist, because most of the artists here went to university, learned art, but he was someone who just took a paintbrush and some paint and explored. And if you just look at all the art around and this, it's very different. And there's a lot of individuality in this art. And even though this is Jesus, this is not something, this is not a way we usually picture Jesus. And if you just look like the lines, they're just so, it's very different and it's almost psychotic in a way. Because here again, art explores energy, emotion, and in a very personal opinion, I think art is all about that energy and emotion. It's trying to use this random, material to convey a vast idea. So I'll be ending my tour here for now. And anyways, you can just feel free to walk around because we do have some really interesting video works over there. So there's a movie called stop motion animation movie called 83, a documentary there. And there's actually one of the world's first documentaries, the Song of Ceylon. It was commissioned by the T-Board in the 40s, and it's considered as one of the world's first documentaries when the genre was coming into. That would be really interesting. And there's another work next to it called A Song of Ceylon, which is this very experimental, almost like a fever dream sort of movie. So if you have time, just take a look. And if you have any questions, we have these visit educators all around. They'll be happy to help you out. And thanks a lot for being here. That nice time. Thank you.